Good evening, I'm Jon Lentz, Sitting State's Managing Editor, and this is Last Look. I'm joined today by State Senator Kevin Parker. Thanks for joining us today.
No, thank you, John.
So first of all, I wanted to ask you about your priorities for next year in Albany. Any top legislative ideas you have that you want to push?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things, one of which is not mine, but I think that the biggest thing that we need to do in Albany this year is a thing that's important for the entire state, but particularly for New York and my community, which is the decriminalization of marijuana. It's created, we've dealt with stop and frisk to a certain degree on a city level in New York City, but we have a problem where we have marijuana arrests and prosecutions that really, outweigh what they really should in terms of a penalty position. It's something I know the governor has talked about and has been a priority for him. Even members of the Independent Democratic Caucus have some bills on it. And so I think that that's going to be a big thing, not just for me, but a lot of the members of the state legislature. Other than that, one of the things that I'm really involved in is energy. As you know, I'm the ranking member on the Energy and Telecommunications Committee. One of the things I would like to see in Brooklyn is a alternative energy center that looks like the Nanotech Center up in Albany, but something that serves the entire state as it relates to not just looking at alternative energy as a commodity, but also as an industry. We really ought to be the leader in terms of sustainable energy and alternative energy, and again, not just in its use and its application, but the actual industry. So, looking at new advances in solar and solar voltaic activity and tidal power and cogeneration, and really looking at those things. And it would be a partnership between the city university and the state university, but also help people with good ideas take their ideas to market. And so that's really another idea that I have that I think is going to be really, really important, and it's going to be at the top of my list of things that we ought to do. Lastly, we're coming up on the 50-year anniversary of Gideon, which is, provides for criminal defense, right? And the fact that people have to have a defense attorney. Well, we don't do the same thing on civil cases. I would like to see that happen here in the state of New York. We're in the process of drafting a bill now that will provide a civil Gideon representation for people throughout our state.
Now, one issue going on now out of session is this Moreland Commission on public corruption. Some people have said they're concerned that the governor's overreaching with this. What are your thoughts on this commission? Is it doing good work, do you think? Is it something that's needed?
Well, right now it's hard to tell, because they're just in the middle of their investigation. I certainly understand the governor's impetus for bringing it forth. Last fall we had a dramatic, numbers of indictments and arrests and so on and so forth. And so I think the governor felt like he needed to respond to that, and certainly don't fault him for that. Right now, I think for us, nobody should rush to judgment. We should see what the results of the commission are. There's certainly some room for improvements in terms of the public officers law in the state of New York, and I'm like to see obviously what the recommendations are, so that we can have a better legislature and a more seemingly honest legislature. Obviously is helpful for everyone, including having the trust of our constituencies.
One thing it's looking at is outside income for lawmakers. Do you see pay raises as something that could actually improve government and make it less corrupt? Yeah, certainly.
I think we ought to go further than that. We're constitutionally a part-time job. I think that we ought to change the law such that state legislators are full-time with no outside income. And obviously a pay raise would go alongside that. And I think we actually ought to even lengthen the terms. A 2-year term gives you really about 8 months to actually do work, and then you spend the rest of the time trying to run for re-election. I think 4-year terms for legislators would be appropriate. And I think those kind of changes would certainly, I think, both help the legislative process, but then also take away some of these concerns around corruption.
Another change you've called for up in Albany is how the budget is done. You've talked about how the governor has a lot of power, and maybe you have a proposal I think you brought up last year to change that.
Yeah, during the floor debate on the budget last year, I mean, the budget is really the most important thing I do, and all of us do as a legislature, right? The state of New York has the third largest budget in the entire country after the federal government, the state of California, and then the state of New York. Our budget this year was about $162 billion, right, enacted. And so, you know, it's a tremendous amount of money. But the process is really a process that's kind of dominated by the governor, right? And so, you know, what I've been suggesting is that there really ought to be a bill that changes the Constitution. And the reason why the governor has so much control in this is that about literally 100 years ago, they changed the state constitution to give the governor all this control because of a set of circumstances that was unique to that particular time. We've gone past that time, and we really need to have a legislative process that allows legislators to decide where dollars are being spent in the state. It shouldn't just be the governor, which is why you have a budget process. And it's really, you know, 212 of us, you know, around the state who knows what the needs are in our individual districts, but we don't really have the kind of autonomy that we ought to have in the budget process to make those kind of determinations. And I'm certainly an advocate for each community having more say. Because again, it's not about me having say, it's about the people in my district having say through me about what they want for their communities that they currently don't have.
What do you think are the chances that you could get that kind of change in how the budget's?
Well, I think if the legislature decides that they want it to happen, it's a good chance, right? I mean, the reality, we have the votes, and we certainly could overturn the governor's veto if we thought it was important enough. But I think there's actually a three-way, well now in the legislature, a four-way, you know, compromise that we could get to, and certainly I would like to see the legislative leaders bring it up. I don't expect the governor to bring it up because I don't see him lining up to you know, rushing to the front to decrease his power. But I think he would be open to a more democratic process as it relates to the budget.
Now, a lot of the news going on right now in the political world is in New York City. You just had the primary elections. Bill Thompson just conceded. Bill Blasio is going to be the Democratic nominee. There are some interesting racial aspects there that de Blasio, I think, split the black vote with Thompson. What do you make of that?
Well, it's a maturity that you're seeing in terms of the electorate, particularly in Black and Latino communities. We're really now in like our third generation. If you look at 1967 with the election of Kurt Schmoke as kind of the beginning of the most recent you know, black political engagement, that you're seeing now, you know, African American political incorporation going beyond just a black face in a high place, but saying who is the best candidate for me and my family? Who are the ones who incorporate our values and we feel are going to make the best changes for us? And I think that, you know, what you're starting to see is, frankly, black candidates taking black communities for granted and thinking that they had their votes. And I think that, you know, Public Advocate de Blasio did not subscribe to that, and certainly went after everyone's vote and really made a case and that allowed him to win the primary.
Another interesting race was Brooklyn DA. You had longtime DA Charles Hines getting ousted in the primary. Ken Thompson, who's African American, is the nominee. Looks like he'll have that seat. Any thoughts on the outcome of that race?
Yeah, it was really a surprise, I think, to a lot of us, only because I think that Charles Hines has been such an institution in the community, and I think that it wasn't really so much that people were enamored with his performance as much as they kind of thought it would just be what it was. But let me say, Ken Thompson has an incredibly compelling story. He has impeccable credentials and his background, you know, coming from public housing, his mother being a police officer, him being a U.S. District Attorney, and really having both the background and the vision, more importantly, of what ought to be happening as it relates to criminal justice in our borough. You know, those things, I think, are what brought him across the finish line ahead of D.A. Hines, who we certainly, you know, thank for his service and you know, and did a lot of good things for the borough. You know, but everybody has their time, and I think, you know, it's now Ken Thompson's time.
Senator Parker, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And that's it for Last Look. To check out other Last Look videos, go to our website, cityandstateny.com.